One of the things we wanted to do was establish that this car was the star as well as the human cast. So we decided to have a scene where you see her birth, or at least her emerging from being put together. And even at that point, she is an evil creature.
One thing I recommend to screenwriters is don't research something to the nth degree. And I say this because I remember at this time, for about a day, I was trying to learn everything I could about automobile manufacture. And I realized, wait a minute, this is not the story. The emotional beats are what is important. It was relatively easy once I made that discovery to then just have the car be made.
That was the first thing we shot in the picture. It was a dormant factory. It had not been an auto plant. And Dan Lamino, the art director, had made it look like a World War II auto plant. It's just after World War II. Don't forget, today it's all by computers and robots and things like that. You had to really show men in pits screwing things in and all that kind of stuff. And when you walked into that set, between the clothes and the whole look of the thing, you felt it was 1957, and you felt you were in some kind of Detroit archaic assembly line.
Well, one of the ways we approached it, Donald M. Morgan, who was the cinematographer, had an idea of shooting the opening with Fujifilm, which is softer, makes everything a little bit softer than Eastman Kodak. So it had an older look to it, if you will, a kind of aged, brownish look. And it made it appropriate for a flashback.
Establishing who's who is very important at the beginning of the film. And I think that one of the ways we were able to make Arnie look more like a loser was by making Dennis look more like a winner. I mean, Dennis was a jock. He was a football player. He was a good-looking guy. But Arnie, although Keith Gordon, the actor, is quite a good-looking guy, they bent over backwards, I think, to make him look as bad as they could at first so that he could get better as the film went on. And I think one of Stephen King's achievements in writing is that he really understands how people feel. And certainly, to some degree, everybody feels like a geek when they're in high school. I think to some degree everybody can relate to what Arnie was going through. He was going through it a little more extreme than most people. But that loser aspect that I think everybody is afraid to exhibit, certainly we were trying left and right to find more and more examples to show.
That we filmed at a real high school auto shop. And the idea was to show him as not only ostracized by his own classmates, but totally out of step with everything that was going on in his high school. I mean, at one time we're playing with a scene where he would be sitting in the classroom and he would know all the answers. It was very obvious he could do the mathematical problem much quicker than anybody else. But we felt that that didn't really say what we wanted him to say, and that was that he was out of step with everybody of his generation going to a middle-class public school. So when we got into the shop and you have these kids turn against him, you get the feeling this is not the first time he's been beaten or spit on or insulted.
John, I think, said a few times, let it be real. He definitely helped it stay in that place. And again, it wasn't like he had to do big speeches about it. I would get it pretty fast because he was pretty clear. He would just say, yeah, this is, you're really scared. And I would go, oh, okay, and then I would just let it be a little bit more natural. And that's the fun of acting because it wasn't scary at all. I mean, the actors were all very nice people. They weren't really bullies. But that's the great fun of acting is that, it's kind of like little kids playing pretend. You throw yourself into it, and for that moment, it's real. And then they say, cut, and you're back to the people that you all were.
On his way back from home after the first day at school, Arnie sees this wreck of a car, Christine. And I think he probably relates to Christine. I think Christine, in a sense, symbolizes ugliness and symbolizes potential. And I think what Arnie builds into Christine, what Christine comes to mean for Arnie, is not just making Christine beautiful, but making Arnie beautiful, which is sort of what happens in the book and the movie.
Well, it's that old acting thing of substitution, where that car became the woman I was in love with, and you remember what those feelings are like when you first see somebody that you flip out for, and you remember the first dates, and then it was actually great fun, again, in my script, taking all these little notes going, what is this the equivalent of? When I first touched the car, what part of woman X's body am I really touching? So there was always, for me, these little notes I just take for myself, just to give myself that specific. And then you kind of forget about it. You don't play the homework, but that was always the homework of it. And you just found those things, and it was really funny. I mean, again, it sounds silly, but it was silly, but it was still great fun to take all that stuff and put it onto a car.
I remember it being just a great overcast day, and the whole thing felt very real. It's one of the few moments in the movie where we didn't have to work with effects or cars or stopping and starting. I mean, we got to kind of play out a whole sequence, and I thought Robert Blossom's was amazing.
The least fun things to do as a director is go on a location scout. Your location manager gets you several choices, and we go driving around in a van together early in the morning looking at these various locations, and some of them don't work because they're too small and the light isn't right. And Darnell's, it was in Irwindale, which is quite a distance away from Los Angeles and where I lived, but it had the space we needed.
It was a wire factory during World War II. Huge, huge. You only see about half of it in the picture. It's that long a building. The other half we divided and used as a garage to rebuild the Christines as they began to fall apart on us and be damaged. So you had a body shop on one half and a set on the other half.
The character of Will Darnell was very colorfully made by Robert Prosky. In fact, I remember one day going out on location, and Prosky was there, and he said, "Aren't there a few more things you can add to this? It seems to me back on page such and such, he says something about putting the little toilet paper thingies on the spools." And I went back, and sure enough, there was some more colorful stuff I could add, and I did add it, and it enhanced the film, I think.
I was in awe of Keith Gordon because he was a much more experienced actor than I, and the role that he had was far more challenging. He had to progress from being this innocuous nerd to being this very cool, even deadly man. And since you shoot out of order in a film, it makes it even more difficult.
What also became important was even finding the look, and that took forever. You know, we experimented with different costumes and different looks, and ultimately finding things that had elements of the 50s in the costumes became very important. As he kind of got cooler and scarier, he also became more of the era of the car. So that was very useful, because finding those clothes helped me find the physicality of the guy.
Keith knew exactly what he was going to do. My only job was to just, suggest little things, but he was such a tremendous actor in that role.
It was hard to find a drive-in. I don't think there's any drive-ins right now, today, 20 years later. At the time, there was one. You take it over, you rent it, you rig for rain, because it never rains in California, or usually doesn't. And I think we were there 3 nights to do it.
That was tough. I gotta tell you, making out with Alexandra was really a painful and difficult thing, but I did it because it was for the good of the movie. No, she was, what a sweetheart. Alexandra and I hadn't worked together that much at that point, and she was very beautiful, and I was very nervous before we did the makeout scene, so I think I actually went up to her and I said, "Do you want to kiss before we do the scene so that we've gotten that out of the way?" So we did, which was nice. The scene itself, it's funny, the funny thing about doing sex scenes is often, not always, but often they're not all that sexy to do. And this wasn't really sexy, but it's a makeout scene, and I'm touching her breasts, and she's touching my crotch, all of which looks like great fun. But when you've got a crew of people, and they're saying, "Move your hand 3 inches to the right," and it's not being designed for erotic pleasure, it's being designed for what will look right to a camera. But she was really good sport about it, and people were very cool, and John kept the atmosphere very light.
I tried to make it as visual as possible. You have this girl trapped in a car and she's choking to death. You have this incredible light that fires up from the inside. It's glowing hot in there. And I just imagined her being in a box. Everything, she's trapped, so you shoot from above and the sides. You get the idea there's no place out for her. She's going to die in that car.
That was well thought out by John. John knew exactly what he wanted, and it's a nice moment for both of the leads, as well as showing the fury and jealousy of Christine. And that's the whole point of the scene, that the car is jealous because Arnie has a girlfriend.
As a car buff, I was, always go to car shows. I loved cars. So the cars themselves were just remarkable. On the other hand, they didn't always work so well. They had been built with this very strange push-button transmission that didn't last very long in Detroit because I don't think it worked very well. And on a 20-year-old car, it worked that much worse. So many takes, you'd be in gear and you'd push the button and just nothing would happen. And I'm sitting in the car pushing the buttons and, there's nothing you can do. And then some technician would come in and try to tighten everything. And then they had Christines that were designed for all these different purposes. They had ones that had extra reinforcements so they could bang into stuff and take very little damage. They had ones that had very hot rod engines put in so they could peel out. There were ones that were really built to look absolutely perfect, and every angle looked great. So they would just pull out different ones depending on what the scene was.
I remember the scene when he discovers that his car's been smashed by the bad kids at school, and he pushes me, he's so upset, he's taking it out on me. I remember that a friend of mine who was watching with me said, "Did he really hit you?" And I was startled.
I thought that might be just a cool thing to do, just to, as an actor, to really startle her. And so when we rehearsed, it was much more low-key. And then I really turned on her and started screaming in her face, and you could just see her like really react, and it's a great, very real moment. But that was the kind of things as an actor, it was fun, and again, that character would allow you to do that kind of thing. It's utterly sexual, and that was John. I mean, that was John said to me, he said, let this be about, show me your body. And the more John encouraged me to play the sexual relationship with the car, the romantic relationship with the car, the more fun I had as an actor. And that was great. I mean, what a fun thing to kind of take that car and turn it into the most gorgeous woman in the world, taking off her clothes, doing a striptease, and just watching it as if it was the sexiest thing in the world. It was really, it was funny as hell. The hard thing is not finding yourself wanting to crack up when you're doing it.
Well, initially, we didn't plan on showing you very much of the transformation. We planned on doing it as an off-screen situation where you'd see the car wrecked and you would come back and find it completely restored. And that was the way the picture was shot. And I felt, So Richard Kobritz and I huddled together and I said, I think we need a little bit more juice in there. Because in a sense, the picture is not a horror picture. It doesn't have a lot of gore. It doesn't have a lot of scenes of obvious terror. It's a little bit different. And for a long time in the film, nothing really happens to anybody. It's a development of relationship between Arnie and the car, and Stockwell, and so forth. So we went back after we had finished the picture and shot some inserts of the car coming back to life.
It was not an easy thing to do in those days. And so this was after the filming was completed, and Roy Arbogast, our special effects man, got together with John Carpenter and figured it all out.
He rigged the car up with a bunch of hydraulics and pulled it in, just crushed it. We shot it in poor man's reverse. Just turn the camera upside down so that when you go to the lab, you just slip it. You don't have to go through an optical process, which keeps it first generation negative, so it looks a little bit more real.
In terms of the death sequences, there is a discrepancy between how things were done in the book and how things were done on film. Usually because we went for the more cinematic approach. One contribution I feel good about having made is having thought of the forklift alley where Moochie gets cornered by Christine.
King has always had the theory that if you're making a horror movie, your first rule is that you're truly going to scare people. And if you can't scare them, you've got to gross them out. This is King. We were still making a movie that's got to exist on a horror level. That's the audience that it's being pitched at. And be it a bestseller or not, it still has got to get that kind of an audience. We knew that we could dress it up with good acting, but it all had to work. And in terms of the violence, the thing with Moochie where the car squeezes him, actually you don't see that much. It's more a montage. And I think the violence, oddly enough, is probably kept to a real minimum. And whatever it is done in an almost montage sort of way.
It was a conscious decision about the amount of gore in the beginning. It was conscious that let's just show it to an extent, let's don't show it any further. Now, whether that was the right decision or wrong decision, I don't know.
I tried to be around for as much of the shooting as possible because that was my wanting to learn about the whole filmmaking process. So I would go out there, like when they were shooting the whole scene where the gas station is destroyed and Buddy Repperton's run over, I was around for all of that.
We built that gas station. It was an undeveloped piece of land at the time. And that visual image of the car going down the road as a ball of flame, not to have to do stunts. It shouldn't jump over buildings or jump over cars. And to just play that visual image and be willing to do it, as Leonard was, I think is what made the scene.
When I was in that car, and I've got a full, huge fire suit on that they fight airplane fires with. It wasn't a fire suit like you use in the film business where you get set on fire and you're filmed that way. I had a big plate and the whole thing. I had oxygen and the whole deal. So I was in that car. We set the building on fire. There are flame jets and the whole thing, and I can hear this tin crackling and everything. And as I start to back out with Christine, the motor killed. So we had a signal that if I'm in there for just so long, then I got to shut everything off, just in the event that something happens. And not only am I in a car that's totally on fire, but I'm in a building that's totally on fire. And I got this car backing out just ever so slightly, and then it quit. So we had to do it in a couple little pieces and get it going because the heat was so intense and the air was being just sucked right out of there, so the car just died. And here I am with all this flame going around me, and I was well protected, but you don't want to stay in there that long.
Christine drives out on fire, and Leonard had to drive inside, but the windows were blackened, so he really couldn't see very well.
John wanted to really keep the mystery alive until the very end as to whether Arnie was doing the killings or whether the car was doing the killings sort of on Arnie's behalf or out of love for Arnie or whatever. That's why the windows of the car were blackened in during a lot of the chase scenes and all that. First of all, on a practical level, it's good because you wouldn't see there was a stunt guy in there and lots of equipment. But also, you wouldn't know, well, is the car alone or is Arnie in that car?
It's pretty tough to see when you're going 70 miles an hour down a city street. A little tough to see, but it wasn't really all that bad. You know, I'm trying to make it sound like a lot worse than it is. It wasn't, but you just got to pay a little more attention when you can't see.
The scene with the parents was one of the great fun scenes to do because I was young enough that I still had all those childlike, adolescent angers at my parents and stuff to act out. So it was great fun to be able to do it. And now we look at a scene where a kid attacks his parents, and it's maybe a little less shocking than it was at the time, and sadly a little more scary because it's a little more real. At the time, I think it seemed more cartoony in a good way. Now it seems like, yeah, there are probably more kids being like that, which is a really sad comment of where our society has gone in the 20 years since.
Back when Christine was made, a hard R was what they wanted. And so they wanted me to go back and find more ways for students to swear. Later on, I think the New York Times called Christine the most foul language film in the history of English-speaking cinema. However, in the same year, a few months later, Scarface came out, and Scarface had the F word uttered by Al Pacino 200 times, so that left me off the hook.
We shot that in the studio, which was a good thing because originally they had bolted the front of the car onto the front of a Mack truck and were running the thing at 90 miles an hour, and it was about 150 decibels, and then you couldn't hear anything. So the dialogue would have had all to have been looped, which would have been terrible. But more than that, all I remember thinking is, I don't want to die, because there were no wheels on the car, so we were just suspended off this truck. And I thought, well, if one weld breaks, basically we go into the truck goes over us, and it's all over. So I was just wanting it to be over. So I was very happy when we went back and redid the scene in the studio, did it with lighting effects, and that let me kind of concentrate a lot more on the acting than on just, oh my God, get me out of here. And John had such a sense of humor in the making of the movie. He was not doing an easy thing. I mean, doing this movie on a limited budget, I think it was like $8 million, which was more back then, but still small for a big effects movie. He would have had every right to be tense and cranky, but he really wasn't. He kept things very loose. He worked with the same crew a lot, so he just sort of enjoyed the process and laughed with the people around him and played practical jokes and accepted practical jokes being played. And that was something that to me was a revelation, that you could make a movie and still have so much fun in the process was something that I thought, okay, when I get to make movies, I want to do it that way.
And we played a joke on John Carpenter in that I have a twin sister, but I'd only been in LA for a year, so nobody knew. She's my identical twin. Her name is Caroline. So the makeup people and the hair people and the first AD were in on it. And they dressed her up, did her hair and her makeup the same way. And it was a shot with John where she had to get up in the bulldozer at the end of the movie. And so Caroline gets up in the bulldozer and they start shooting.
And there's something wrong with Alexandra. I have no idea what it is. She doesn't act like herself today. She doesn't quite sound like herself today. And there's something in her eyes that's missed. It's almost like a science fiction movie that someone has been replaced.
There's this great still of John peering up at her quizzically like, who is this woman that I just saw the night before? And she seems different. So they shoot the scene with my sister, and then I walk on the set and I go, John, have you fired me already? And he looks, what? He doesn't, ah! There's two of her.
The ending sequence was the time we had to really pull it out. We had to anthropomorphize Christine to the fullest extent, meaning that we had to give the car more creature-like, monster-like aspects, because we really hadn't before. So that was when we had the teeth. It moved with a lot more like a vicious shark, if you know, a killing machine. So we had to pull it out then. That was our last chance.
The challenge of any stunt sequence, like what we did with the finale on Christine, is to keep everybody safe. But that's a given. That goes without saying. The most important thing past that is to give Mr. Carpenter the visual effect that he wants to get. Every stunt sequence has its own demands. And indigenous to those demands, there's things that you have to pull off, and you got to put your head on it and say, wait a minute, how are we going to do this now? And you walk through it. And then you get your camera angles, and you get your storyboards, and you modify and you add, and it's just like putting a puzzle together.
We're not going to roll until Mike gets inside the car, and we're going to roll immediately after he gets inside the car.
In the very ending sequence, I sat down with a storyboard artist because we had the action basically laid out from the novel to the script, now to the screen. And I said, just draw me out some angles. Let me see what we're talking about. And he had a book about that thick. It was huge. So I realized, well, we can't do this. I have to simplify this. And I have to find certain points where I want to emphasize the car, emphasize the people, and basically kind of just, we went in there and did it. So it was planned, and yet there was a lot of last minute kind of making stuff up as we went. He flies through the windshield, and I wanted one last moment for him because I felt that wasn't good enough. We had a shot of him dead, and this wasn't enough. We know we're going to kill him. Let's really kill him and give him a dying moment so he has a shard of glass in him. And then he reaches out and touches the grill, Christine's grill, as if another kind of sexual moment. Oh, baby, I have to go. You know, I'm dead. And so forth. It worked out pretty well.
And I remember, again, being a pretentious young actor, wanting my face to be all red for the scene, so I would like hold my breath and force blood into my face before it. And of course, after about take 3, I passed out, which was really embarrassing. And I remember being so embarrassed and then denying it and kind of acting like, oh, that was all a joke. And I think the crew was completely confused, like, that wasn't very funny.
Well, to my great surprise and joy, I made the right decision in casting this bulldozer as the weapon of our good guys. I remember the transportation department wanted me to have a rather more modern-looking vehicle with big tires. I wanted some old-fashioned thing that was just felt like something from the early industrial age. So this bulldozer, it chewed up the floor. And we had finally gotten to the point where the car had been staked with the shovel and was not moving too much. And I asked the transportation people and the stunt people, can you drive that thing up on top of the car? When they did, it would just mounts it. So it literally was like that sodomy.
At the end of the rough cut, there is a scene where Christine is turned into a cube. And in this cut, I'm running the crane that turns her into the cube. And George Thorogood comes out from a slag heap. And I hop off the crane and give 5 to George. He gives 5 to me, and we walk off together. Well, it was probably one of the worst performances anyone has ever done. I'm not an actor. And so mercifully that was cut from the film.
There was never a thought of a sequel, but that open ending where evil never really quite goes away, you know, and they look at this block of junk now, which was Christine, and all of a sudden it just begins to move. I thought that was a nice touch. I think that, you know, the evil was only put away for the moment, and somehow it may manifest itself again.